seed that you buy from, well, a small seed company for sure, but definitely a large seed company can have unusual or unexpected opportunities in there too. Because the seed grower that produced the seed may have had an accidental cross on their farm that they weren't expecting. And there may just be a couple of them. It might be 1 out of 1,000 or 10,000, but you might get to see it. Sometimes there's actually bigger accidents than happen, and there might be 10 or 20% off types. And then sometimes, even if there wasn't a cross, there can be some ancestral genes that, for whatever combination in this specific generation, exhibit themselves. And there's something that wasn't there before that you can possibly hold on to. Welcome to episode 68 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. The podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support-podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Turnasol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. Today we have another minisode about unexpected seed opportunities on your farm. But first, a little news. Let's start off with a little bit of Turnasol farm news. So right now we're the end of May, and we're just about finished planting the seed fields. Actually, I should say I'm hoping we're just about finished planting the seed fields because this is being recorded a few weeks in advance. Actually, what I'm doing right now is that on our farm at Turnasol, we're outside of Montreal in Canada, and we cannot really get into the field before May 1st most years because the ground is just so wet after the winter. And so at this point, we're kind of just waiting for it to dry out, and it's just about there, and we're about to start planting our outdoor frost-hardy crops. So that's going to be winter radishes that we overwintered in cold rooms, and then also spring radishes that we started in a greenhouse bed and have harvested, 500 or 600, 700 radishes, and we're going to be planting those out also. And then we're also planting out some poppies, of course poppies, and maybe some nigellas and some brassicas. So all of that's what we're doing right now, and hopefully when you're listening to this, we're just beginning or maybe finishing doing tomatoes and peppers, depending on what the season's like and what the frost dates are looking like. Anyway, that's what's going on at the farm right now. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is you only have a couple more days to use the Harvest Ready promo code to get 50% off the Harvest System Design course. This is my Harvest course. This is a course to make you think through the way your whole harvest system works. The team members, the space, the flow of information, and the flow of product, be the vegetables, flowers, seeds, to make sure that you're doing things efficiently. This is a course I originally gave live, and this is a recording of the course. It's about an hour and a half long, and you can register at spreadsheet.farm/courses. So the promo code is Harvest Ready to get 50% off the course. And now let's get into today's minisode topic. If you've been listening to the podcast, or you've been reading my blog, or you read The Seed Farmer, you know that I keep telling you, don't worry so much about isolation distances, or don't even worry about them at all. And I keep telling you that a little bit of crossing is not a bad thing. Maybe be careful in squashes, but otherwise a little bit of crossing is not a bad thing. And this is the time of year where you can start to see what I mean by that. So let's say you harvest some brassica seeds last fall or last summer. Maybe it's some tatsoi seed. And maybe you had some other brassica rapa close by, and there could have been some cross-pollination. Anyway, so you harvested some last summer, and you're sowing it this spring. And let's say you have a first day you can be in the field May 1st, like us. At this time of year is probably when you're starting to see the first young mature plants from seed that you may have harvested last year. And you're starting to see how they might be different from their neighbors. And you're getting a chance to see what's called an off type in the seed world. So something that's just, I guess, not on type. Somebody just stands out. A little brassica green or a lettuce with its own personality. This is the time for you to look for these individuals that are different and to flag them and to keep them and to evaluate them to see whether it's something that you want in the future. This is the beginning of an exciting new seed project. So, how do we do that? First off, walk through your fields as much as you can. Look at all the plants. Look at each one and pay attention to things that are different. Now, I started off by saying that this might come from seed that you harvested last year and are growing out. And that, especially if you've been following my advice, to not worry about isolation distance too much. But I also want to note, before we talk a little bit more about this, that seed that you buy from, well, a small seed company for sure, but definitely a large seed company, can have unusual or unexpected opportunities in there too. Because the seed grower that produced the seed may have had an accidental cross on their farm that they weren't expecting. And there may just be a couple of them. It might be 1 out of 1,000 or 10,000, but you might get to see it. Sometimes there's actually bigger accidents than happen, and there might be 10 or 20% off types. I've definitely seen that in some seeds. And then sometimes, even if there wasn't a cross, there can be some ancestral genes that, for whatever combination in this specific generation, exhibit themselves. And there's something that wasn't there before that you can possibly hold on to. So to take advantage of these unexpected opportunities, what you need to do is first is you have to go out in the field. You got to take field walks regularly and look at all the plants. And I hope you're doing that anyway to see what is what's thriving, what needs water, what needs weeding, what you can harvest. I hope you're doing that anyway. But now also think about what's a little bit different. One thing I like to do is I like to have flagging tape or small marking flags on hand, and I'm going through and I find something that's different, I will flag it because I might not think about it later. I also take a picture. This is actually another important thing, is take pictures of things that are different. I just take a picture of it, and I might take a few pictures, and then a larger picture of where it might be in the field. But that flag really helps because when you're doing your next field walk, you can go back to that spot and you can look at it and see how it's changed. And if really it has changed, maybe it actually was a plant that needed a little bit of nitrogen, was a little bit purpler than it should have been, but once it caught up with the rest, it looks like all the rest. And then you don't care about the flag. But maybe it's something that is actually different. Now, so that's the first part, is seeing something's different. Another thing at this point is if you see an individual that's different, mixed in with a variety, you should also pay attention. Does this look like something else that you're growing on the farm? So let's say you have some green oakleaf lettuce and there's a red lettuce that mixes in, a red romaine that pops up. But you also know that you planted 100 bed feet of red romaine down the row. Maybe you just didn't clean the cedar out well. Or maybe there was a little mix-up somewhere, so it's actually cross-contamination rather than cross-pollination you're seeing. And that can also happen with seed that you buy in. So do consider that possibility, and I'm sure you don't make any mistakes on your farm, but I've definitely seen on our farm sometimes somebody plants something in the wrong spot. And that's just how it is. But if you've ruled out the fact that it might just be a handling mistake, then there you might have a cross-pollination opportunity. Now, this is something that I'm often looking for in hot peppers because the hot peppers that we sell for seed, we definitely grow with isolation distance, but the hot peppers that we just use for ourselves, for our own growing out, I don't always grow with isolation distance. So I'm always looking there to see if there's some cross-pollination. One of my breeding projects actually began when I was walking through some Bulgarian carrot peppers that we'd bought from a seed company, and there was one that was different. And I knew it was nothing like any other hot pepper on the farm. This was a little round orange one, and I knew it was different, and I selected that one, and I wound up within, the next generation, I wound up with a bunch of different phenotypes or a bunch of different individual appearances, and I selected out our carrot bomb pepper from there. So that was something that was from a purchased seed. So that's something to do at this time of year, is just to start looking and identify individuals that are different. and that indicate cross-pollination. Now, the next thing that you're going to do once you flag these individuals and you identify them is you're going to keep watching them, and I've kind of mentioned that already. But what you should think about, and I guess it depends on what crop you're dealing with. If you're dealing with tomatoes, and you probably won't have seen ripe tomatoes at the end of May, but let's say this happens later on this season, you see ripe tomatoes, then, whether it's a seed crop or an eating crop, it's just a matter of not picking the tomatoes to have some for seed. But let's say this is a lettuce crop and you found one that's different. You're going to get in the coming weeks to a point where you're going to harvest this lettuce to eat, to sell, to put in your CSA baskets. And at that point, you got to make sure that nobody harvests this lettuce because it's gone at that point. So that's something also to tell your team about, explain why you're keeping it. But then also, if it was lettuces and you had a bed of 200 lettuces and one that's different, you're not going to want to leave that whole bed intact for one plant to go to seed. So in this case, you could actually dig it up, put it in a 5-gallon pot with soil, and bring it somewhere close to your wash station or somewhere where you have water and that you can water it, and just keep an eye on it and let it go to flower there, and then harvest the seed out of the plant in that pot. Or you could transplant it to an area that won't be tilled under. It could be an herb garden, it could be a dedicated seed area, but transplant it somewhere where you're going to keep plants in the ground for the rest of the season. So those are two options that you can do to make sure that you keep that plant. Now, it's probably good to note down what the original variety was that you took this out of, because once you've dug it up and put it somewhere else, you're going to start not knowing what something is. And ultimately, you don't need to know the history behind the plant, but it will help you a little bit understand what's going to happen in the future when you grow this plant out. Because what you have here is probably an F1 hybrid. So an F1 hybrid is when you have two different lines and there's a cross-pollination, and you get something that is actually probably fairly uniform. Probably if you had multiple crosses of the two lines that gave this, they would look something like what you see right now. And that's a little bit the principle behind when you buy F1 seeds. That's a topic for another conversation. But this F1 hybrid, when you harvest the seed from it and grow it out the next generation, it might look very different from that F1. And it's that F2 generation where you start seeing a lot of diversity. So you just need to keep as many of these interesting individuals to get them to seed and harvest as much seed, because each seed is a unique opportunity of an expression of genetic diversity. And so that's what you're trying to baby these plants to get that seed. And then next year, when you're going to grow them out, if ever they all look the same, maybe you didn't have a cross. And you're like, oh, I made a mistake, or maybe the seed company made a mistake. But probably you're going to have had a cross. And you will see that if they were lettuces, you're going to have lettuces of different colors and maybe different shapes right from the tray. Because this actually starts happening, you can start to identify cross-pollination right from the moment that the plants start to germinate. Now, sometimes you don't take the time to look at the plants as much, which might be why you didn't catch it earlier. But in that F2 generation, there's going to be so much diversity that it's going to be hard to not notice it. And if you don't notice it, one of your employees is going to say, "What is going on, man?" And then you go, "Oh, I guess that's my F2 generation." So anyway, back to this season, your job is to go out, look for unique individuals that may have cross-pollinated, and get them to seed. And take pictures. That's the most important. Or the seed is the most important, but I like the pictures. And this might actually be the first year of a multi-year relationship, maybe a lifetime relationship with these plants, where you keep selecting either something that's very stable and uniform, or maybe you try to select something that's very diverse and has a big gene pool. Either way, this is the beginning of it. And of course, it might be something that 1 or 2 generations down the line, you think, hey, I like that green lettuce a lot better, and you choose to no longer maintain this. But you'll have developed a bit of a relationship with the vegetable lettuce, in addition to just these seeds, and it's going to give you different appreciation. Now, I've definitely taken on maybe one too many of these projects over my life. I'm always looking for the crossed up individuals, and we have, a dozen or so different varieties that have come out in our seed catalog that have come from situations like this. I've also worked with some crops for 5 or 6 years and then chose to no longer pursue it to go on with something else. And I'm always looking for new crossed up individuals to select from and see what happens. I actually have a lettuce in the greenhouse right now that I have a flag beside, and I'm curious to see if it turns out to just being a sucrine lettuce or is it actually a cross. And with that, I'm going to encourage you to go out to your field and go look at your plants, go and meet them, and bring some flags. And that's another minisode of the Seed Farmer Podcast. If you find some very special individuals in your field and you're really excited about them and nobody on the farm or in your household wants to hear more about your crossed up plants, send me some pictures. I want to hear about them. I care. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to Sophia Sedelton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiasedelton.com. Thank you to Molly Briesbort for editing this episode. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/support-podcast. If you haven't already subscribed, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.